small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
One small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. Words that shook the world. But did Neil Armstrong leave behind more than just a legacy? Podcaster Joe Rogan thinks so. As the first man on the moon, Armstrong became a symbol of American space glory, but his final message was puzzling. Now, Rogan believes he's cracked the code. What hidden meaning did he uncover? What secret did Armstrong take to the grave? Let's dive into Rogan's startling moon theory. A childhood rooted in flight. Before Neil Armstrong made history as the first man to set foot on the moon, he was a quiet boy from the Midwest with an insatiable curiosity and a deep love for the sky. Born on August 5, 1930, in Wapakoneta, Ohio, Neil Alden Armstrong was the eldest of 3 children raised by Stephen and Viola Armstrong. His father's job as a state auditor meant the Armstrongs were constantly on the move. By the time Neil was 14, he had lived in 16 different towns across Ohio. For most children, that kind of instability might have been unsettling. But for Neil, it fed a fascination with the world beyond his immediate reach, especially the sky. A pivotal moment came at just 6 years old when he took his first airplane ride in a Ford Trimotor, the iconic Tin Goose. The flight left an impression so powerful that it never left him. From that day forward, Neil was obsessed with the idea of flying, not just traveling in planes, but understanding how they worked, what made them move, and how far they could go. He wasn't like other kids. Where many were drawn to games or mischief, Neil immersed himself in books and building. He constructed model airplanes with obsessive care, designed wind tunnels in his basement, and once even built a working model of a helicopter using scavenged vacuum parts. He spoke little, thought deeply, and was endlessly tinkering. By age 15, Neil was already taking flying lessons in a yellow Aeronca Champion. He paid for them himself, working odd jobs, cutting grass, cleaning basements, stocking shelves. On his 16th birthday, he achieved a milestone that would become the envy of any teenager, earning his pilot's license before even getting a driver's license. His academic path mirrored his intensity. In 1947, at just 17, Armstrong enrolled at Purdue University to study aeronautical engineering, funded by the Holloway Plan, a U.S. Navy scholarship that required 2 years of study, 3 years of military service, and a return to finish the degree. After his initial studies, Armstrong trained as a naval aviator at Naval Air Station Pensacola, and by 1950 was flying F-9 F-2 Panther jets in the Korean War. He completed 78 combat missions and was awarded the Air Medal and 2 gold stars for his valor. But even amidst the chaos of war, Armstrong's quiet demeanor and razor-sharp focus stood out. Fellow pilots described him as calm under pressure, unshaken, analytical, and utterly in control. After his service, he returned to Purdue and graduated in 1955 with a degree in aeronautical engineering, having already proven that his childhood dreams were more than flights of fancy. Long before he left footprints in lunar dust, Neil Armstrong was a boy who wandered Ohio with his family, looking up at the sky and wondering how far he could go. He didn't chase fame, he chased understanding. And in doing so, he soared further than anyone had before. From test pilot to space pioneer, Neil Armstrong's formative NASA years. In 1955, after graduating from Purdue University with a degree in aeronautical engineering and completing distinguished service as a naval aviator in the Korean War, Neil Armstrong joined the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA, the forerunner to NASA. His first assignment was at the Lewis Flight Propulsion Laboratory in Cleveland, Ohio. There, he contributed to advanced propulsion research, a field that would soon evolve into the cutting edge of American aerospace technology. However, Armstrong's ambitions were always tied to the sky, and later that same year, he transferred to NACA's high-speed flight station at Edwards Air Force Base in California. It was at Edwards, considered the epicenter of experimental aviation during the Cold War, that Armstrong's legacy as a test pilot began to take shape. Surrounded by some of the most daring and skilled pilots of the era, Armstrong stood out not for flamboyance, but for precision, intellect, and an almost serene calm under pressure. At Edwards, Armstrong tested a broad range of aircraft, each with unique challenges and risks. These included the Bell X-1B, an advanced variant of the aircraft that had first broken the sound barrier, and various early jet fighters. But it was the North American X-15 that truly defined this chapter of his career. The X-15 was a rocket-powered aircraft capable of reaching the edge of space. Between 1960 and 1962, Armstrong flew the X-15 7 times. On these missions, he reached speeds as high as Mach 5.74, nearly 4,000 mph, and altitudes over 207,000 feet, well above the stratosphere and into the threshold of space. These flights were crucial in advancing our understanding of hypersonic flight, high-altitude aerodynamics, and atmospheric re-entry, lessons that would later be vital to both the Mercury and Apollo programs. Armstrong was widely respected by engineers and pilots alike for his rare blend of hands-on flying skill and deep technical knowledge. Unlike many test pilots who relied mostly on instincts and reflexes, Armstrong was an engineer first. He was known for making meticulous notes, offering precise feedback on aircraft performance, and often suggesting design modifications that improved flight safety and efficiency. His colleagues at Edwards considered him one of the most technically capable pilots in the program, capable of not only flying experimental craft, but also helping to build and refine them. In 1958, NACA transitioned into the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, and Armstrong officially became a NASA employee. Around this time, he became involved in early military and civilian space initiatives, including the U.S. Air Force's Man in Space Soonest program and the ambitious, though ultimately canceled, X-20 Dinosaur spaceplane project. These early spaceflight programs were precursors to human orbital flight, and Armstrong's participation in them positioned him as a leading candidate for future astronaut missions. Though initially overlooked for NASA's first astronaut corps, the famed Mercury 7, because he was a civilian and not a military test pilot at the time, Armstrong's growing reputation as a test pilot engineer earned him a place in NASA's second astronaut group in 1962. He joined other future legends like Jim Lovell, Frank Borman, and John Young in what would become the backbone of the Gemini and Apollo programs. This chapter of Armstrong's life, marked by daring experimentation, scientific rigor, and quiet brilliance, laid the essential groundwork for the role that would define him forever: commander of Apollo 11 and the first human to walk on the moon. Personal tragedy: the loss of Karen Armstrong. Even after entering the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, his journey to becoming the first person to walk on the moon was not easy. There was a profound personal loss and extraordinary professional challenges. Two pivotal events: the death of his young daughter Karen and the near-disastrous Gemini 8 mission. In 1962, Armstrong and his wife Janet faced an unimaginable tragedy when their 2-year-old daughter Karen, affectionately nicknamed Muffy, was diagnosed with diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma. Despite medical efforts, Karen passed away later that year. This devastating loss deeply affected Armstrong, leading him to immerse himself in his work as a coping mechanism. His focus on the Gemini program became both a distraction and a dedication to a greater purpose. On March 16, 1966, Armstrong commanded the Gemini 8 mission alongside pilot David Scott. The mission achieved a significant milestone by performing the first successful docking of 2 spacecraft in orbit, connecting with the Agena target vehicle. However, shortly after docking, the combined spacecraft began to spin uncontrollably due to a malfunctioning thruster on the Gemini capsule. The rotation reached a perilous rate of 296 degrees per second, threatening the astronaut's consciousness and the structural integrity of the spacecraft. Demonstrating remarkable composure, Armstrong disengaged from the Agena and activated the Gemini's re-entry control system thrusters, typically reserved for re-entry procedures. This decisive action stabilized the spacecraft but necessitated an immediate mission abort, leading to an emergency splashdown in the Pacific Ocean after just 10 hours and 41 minutes in space. Armstrong's adept handling of the Gemini 8 crisis earned him widespread acclaim within NASA and reinforced his reputation as a meticulous and unflappable pilot. His ability to remain calm under pressure was instrumental in his selection as the commander of Apollo 11, the mission that would see him take humanity's first steps on the lunar surface. Apollo 11 crew formation. The formation of the Apollo 11 crew was a meticulous process shaped by NASA's rotational assignment system, unforeseen medical issues, and interpersonal dynamics. Initially, Neil Armstrong was assigned as commander, with Jim Lovell as command module pilot and Buzz Aldrin as lunar module pilot on the backup crew for Apollo 9. Due to delays in the lunar module's readiness, Apollo 8 and Apollo 9 swapped prime and backup crews, positioning Armstrong's team as the backup for Apollo 8. This shift placed them in line to become the prime crew for Apollo 11, following NASA's standard crew rotation policy. However, a medical issue arose when Michael Collins, originally slated as the command module pilot for Apollo 8, developed a bone spur on his spine, necessitating surgery. Jim Lovell replaced Collins on Apollo 8, and upon recovery, Collins joined Armstrong's crew as the command module pilot for Apollo 11. During Collins' recovery, Fred Hayes temporarily filled in as backup lunar module pilot, and Aldrin served as backup command module pilot for Apollo 8. The backup crew for Apollo 11 comprised Jim Lovell as commander, William Anders as command module pilot, and Fred Hazy as lunar module pilot. Anders had previously flown with Lovell on Apollo 8. In early 1969, Anders accepted a position with the National Aeronautics and Space Council, effective August 1969, and announced his retirement from the astronaut corps. To prepare for any potential delays in Apollo 11's launch, Ken Mattingly was moved from the support crew to train alongside Anders as backup command module pilot. The support crew, responsible for maintaining flight plans, checklists, and mission ground rules, included Ken Mattingly, Ronald Evans, and Bill Pogue. They developed procedures, particularly for emergency situations, ensuring that the prime and backup crews were well prepared during simulations. Unlike the close camaraderie observed in some other Apollo crews, the Apollo 11 team maintained a more professional relationship. Michael Collins described the crew as amiable strangers, noting that they arrived for training separately, lunched separately, and primarily discussed mission-related matters. Armstrong's reserved nature contrasted with Aldrin's assertiveness and Collins's sociability. Despite these differences, the crew functioned effectively, focusing on their shared goal. Neil Armstrong's composed and meticulous demeanor made him an ideal choice for the mission's commander. Described as tight-lipped and phlegmatic, Armstrong was known for his calm under pressure and dedication to preparation. His stoic nature was evident throughout training and the mission itself, contributing to the crew's confidence in his leadership. Apollo 11, humanity's boldest leap. At precisely 9:32 a.m. on July 16, 1969, a deafening roar erupted across Cape Kennedy, Florida, as Apollo 11 surged skyward atop the Saturn V rocket, the most powerful vehicle ever launched by humankind. Towering 363 feet tall and producing 7.5 million pounds of thrust, the Saturn V shook the Earth as it lifted astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins toward destiny. For millions watching around the world, it was a moment of awe, an immense mechanical colossus tearing free from gravity's grip, carrying 3 men further than anyone had ever gone. Just 12 minutes after liftoff, Apollo 11 entered Earth orbit, circling the globe at over 17,000 miles per hour. Then came the next critical maneuver. The rocket's third stage, the S-4B, reignited and propelled the spacecraft into a translunar trajectory, the highway to the moon. At this point, the astronauts began a complex and delicate ballet in space. The Command and Service Module, CSM, nicknamed Columbia, separated, rotated 180 degrees, and docked nose-to-nose with the Lunar Module, LM, Eagle. This procedure, known as transposition and docking, was executed flawlessly. The joined spacecraft continued on toward the Moon, now 250,000 miles away. 4 days later, on July 20th, Apollo 11 entered lunar orbit, circling the alien world below. Armstrong and Aldrin floated into Eagle, leaving Collins alone aboard Columbia, tasked with orbiting and awaiting their return. At 1:47 p.m. EDT, Eagle detached and began its historic descent to the lunar surface. But things didn't go smoothly. As Eagle initiated its landing, Armstrong and Aldrin noticed they were passing lunar landmarks approximately 2 seconds earlier than anticipated. This discrepancy indicated a navigational drift, suggesting that the module was on course to land several miles west of the intended site. Potential causes included gravitational anomalies, mascons, or residual air pressure from the docking tunnel. Midway through the descent, at about 6,000 feet above the lunar surface, the Lunar Module Guidance Computer issued the first of several unexpected program alarms, specifically codes 1201 and 1202. In Houston, engineers quickly recognized the errors as the result of a computer overload, not a mission-critical failure. These alarms signified executive overflows, indicating that the computer was overloaded with tasks and had to prioritize critical functions by dropping less essential ones. The root cause was traced to the rendezvous radar being left on, which, due to a hardware design quirk, caused the computer to process erroneous data, leading to the overload. Flight Director Gene Kranz and his team, under intense pressure, gave the go-ahead to continue. As Eagle dropped closer, Armstrong saw that the pre-selected landing site was littered with boulders and craters. With less than 30 seconds of fuel remaining, he took manual control, skillfully steering the craft to a safer patch of moon dust. At 4:17 p.m. EDT, he radioed calmly, "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." A collective breath was held, and then erupted in cheers around the world. Humanity had arrived. 6.5 hours later, as cameras broadcast grainy images back to Earth, Armstrong descended the LM ladder. With one small step, he imprinted the first human footprint on the moon's surface and uttered the immortal words, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." Soon after, Aldrin joined him, describing the terrain as magnificent desolation. For over 2 hours, the two astronauts explored the Sea of Tranquility, collecting moon rocks, setting up scientific instruments, and planting the American flag, all while Earth hung silently in the black sky above them. After 21 hours and 36 minutes on the moon, Eagle lifted off, reuniting with Columbia in lunar orbit. Together, the crew began the long journey home, re-entering Earth's atmosphere in a blazing inferno before splashing down safely in the Pacific Ocean on July 24, 1969. Apollo 11 was more than a technical triumph. It was a defining moment for all of humanity, a testament to courage, ingenuity, and the belief that we could reach beyond our world and stand on another. First moonwalk and broadcast. On July 20, 1969, the world witnessed a monumental event. Neil Armstrong's first steps on the moon during NASA's Apollo 11 mission. This historic moment was broadcast live to an estimated 600 million viewers worldwide, thanks in large part to the efforts of Australian tracking stations. The television footage was captured by a specially designed slow-scan television camera, transmitting at 10 frames per second with 320 lines of resolution, parameters incompatible with standard broadcast formats. To convert this signal for global television networks, it was displayed on a monitor and refilmed by a conventional television camera, a process that inevitably degraded the image quality. Initially, the signal was received by the Goldstone station in California. However, due to technical issues, the feed was switched to the Honeysuckle Creek station near Canberra, Australia, which successfully transmitted the iconic footage of Armstrong's descent. Shortly thereafter, the Parkes Observatory in New South Wales took over the broadcast. Despite facing 70 meters per hour wind gusts, Parkes provided a superior quality feed for the remainder of the 2.5-hour moonwalk. Interestingly, Australian audiences saw Armstrong's first step approximately 0.3 seconds before the rest of the world, due to the signal's routing from Sydney to Houston. While the public viewed grainy images, engineers at the tracking stations had access to clearer footage. Unfortunately, the original high-quality tapes were later lost, likely due to routine magnetic tape reuse at NASA. Splashdown and recovery. On July 24, 1969, after completing a historic 195-hour mission to the Moon, Apollo 11's command module, Columbia, re-entered Earth's atmosphere and splashed down in the Pacific Ocean, approximately 900 miles southwest of Hawaii. The capsule initially landed in an inverted position, known as Stable 2, with its apex submerged. Within 10 minutes, astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins activated inflatable uprighting bags, successfully righting the spacecraft to Stable 1. The recovery operation was orchestrated by the United States ship Hornet, CVS-12, the designated prime recovery ship for Apollo 11. Due to overcast skies hindering stellar navigation, the Hornet utilized dead reckoning to arrive precisely at the splashdown location. A Navy helicopter, famously known as Helicopter 66, hovered over the capsule, deploying Navy frogmen who secured the spacecraft with flotation collars and attached a sea anchor to prevent drifting. To mitigate any potential contamination from lunar pathogens, the astronauts donned biological isolation garments before being hoisted aboard Helicopter 66. Upon arrival on the United States ship Hornet, they entered a mobile quarantine facility, an Airstream trailer modified to prevent any possible spread of lunar microbes. President Richard Nixon personally welcomed the astronauts through a window of the mobile quarantine facility, expressing the nation's pride in their achievement. National celebration. Following the triumphant return of Apollo 11, the United States erupted in nationwide celebrations to honor astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. On August 13, 1969, New York City hosted a grand ticker tape parade along Broadway, with an estimated 6 million attendees cheering the astronauts as they rode in a custom-built Chrysler Imperial limousine. That same day, Chicago held its own parade to celebrate the crew's historic achievement. Later that evening, President Richard Nixon and First Lady Pat Nixon hosted an official state dinner at the Century Plaza Hotel in Los Angeles, the first such event held outside Washington, D.C. in over a century. The gala was attended by over 50 members of Congress, 44 governors, Chief Justice Warren E. Burger, former Chief Justice Earl Warren, and ambassadors from 83 nations. During the dinner, President Nixon awarded each astronaut the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, recognizing their extraordinary contributions to space exploration and human achievement. On September 16, 1969, the astronauts addressed a joint session of Congress, presenting 2 U.S. flags they had carried to the moon, one to the House of Representatives and the other to the Senate. This event marked the beginning of a 38-day world tour, during which the Apollo 11 crew visited 22 countries, including Mexico, France, India, and Japan, sharing their experiences and promoting goodwill. These celebrations underscored the global significance of the Apollo 11 mission and the astronauts' roles as ambassadors of peace and scientific progress. Neil's eye-opening revelation. Joe Rogan, the ever-curious and sometimes controversial voice behind the Joe Rogan Experience, has often found himself fascinated by the mystery surrounding Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon. But it's not just Armstrong's achievement that intrigues him, it's what happened after the famous giant leap. In several episodes, Rogan has questioned why Armstrong, a global icon, chose to live such a private, almost reclusive life post-mission. Unlike Buzz Aldrin, who frequently spoke about Apollo 11, Armstrong kept largely silent. Rogan found this odd for someone who accomplished humanity's greatest adventure. One particular moment that caught Rogan's attention was Armstrong's 1984 speech at the White House, marking the 25th anniversary of Apollo 11. In the speech, Armstrong said, "There are great ideas undiscovered. Breakthroughs are available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers." Rogan called this statement eerie and cryptic, wondering aloud what Armstrong really meant. Was it poetic humility, or was there something deeper? In his 2020 conversation with filmmaker Bart Sibrel, known for confronting astronauts about the moon landing, Rogan explored these questions even more. Though he never fully endorsed conspiracy theories, Rogan emphasized the importance of questioning and keeping an open mind. He didn't accuse Armstrong of anything. Instead, he acknowledged the emotional weight of being the face of such a monumental mission and the possible toll that took. Whether you believe Armstrong's silence hides a mystery or just reflects a humble man overwhelmed by fame, Rogan's commentary taps into our collective curiosity. As he puts it, "If you don't ask questions, how do you ever learn the truth?" More skepticism. In the decades following the moon landing, a peculiar subculture of skepticism has emerged, fueled by a combination of distrust in government, the allure of mystery, and the viral power of modern media. Among the loudest voices in this arena are podcasters, YouTubers, and a handful of celebrities who claim that the moon landing was an elaborate hoax, and that Neil Armstrong's famously reclusive lifestyle is a clue to the deception. Podcasts that trade in conspiracy and controversy often frame Armstrong's post-Apollo silence as suspicious. Why would the first man on the moon avoid interviews? They ask. Why would someone who achieved what many consider the single greatest accomplishment in human history choose to live in near total obscurity? These questions are posed not out of genuine curiosity, but as bait, drawing in listeners eager for alternative narratives. YouTube, too, is rife with flashy thumbnails showing shadows on the moon, waving flags, and Armstrong with cryptic expressions. Videos titled "NASA Lied to You" or "The Moon Landing Cover-Up Exposed" rack up millions of views, often stitched together with ominous music and cherry-picked sound bites. Armstrong's dignified privacy is recast as a psychological burden, as if he were hiding some terrible truth. A few public figures have thrown fuel on the fire. In the early 2000s, filmmaker and conspiracy theorist Bart Sibrel repeatedly accused NASA astronauts of lying, even confronting Buzz Aldrin in a hotel lobby, an encounter that ended with Aldrin famously punching him in the face. Sibrel and others claimed Armstrong's reluctance to swear on the Bible that he walked on the moon was proof of guilt, not principle. But these theories ignore a crucial truth. Armstrong was never seeking fame. He was an engineer, a pilot, and above all, a team player. He viewed his role not as a personal triumph, but as a step forward for all humanity. His aversion to the spotlight stemmed not from secrecy, but humility. Still, in an age where doubt is packaged as entertainment and facts are often less clickable than controversy, Armstrong's silence continues to be weaponized. For conspiracy theorists, quiet dignity becomes suspicious, and in the ever-churning world of infotainment, even the moon isn't safe from doubt. We hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more amazing stories.